and I'm sure they'll pick up your tab." I glanced over my shoulder, following the line of his eyes. In the back booth were 3 balding men in business suits. 2 of them were talking animatedly, while the third simply scanned the place with his arm flung over the back of the bench. Yeah, he was definitely on the prowl, and I wasn't in the mood to be prey. I turned back to the bartender. "Sorry, not my style. But thanks for the offer. How about I come back there and help you out? You could even go take a break for a while, and I could take over." He cocked a single skeptical brow at me, and that furtive sideways smile slid back into place. "You're a bartender?" "Used to be. Then I owned a few restaurants. Then I died. Then I waited tables. Then I owned another restaurant, and now I'm here." This was what I loved about New Orleans. The bartender didn't even bat an eye at the phrase, "then I died." The place was swarming with death in every corner. I actually attributed much of my inability to locate Eva and Tanner to the constant distraction of spirits floating this way and that. In fact, that should be the collective noun for spirits. A distraction. Most of them were drunk, too, or as drunk as an entity that can no longer drink can be. They'd partied and let the good times roll so hard in their living years that it had seeped into their very souls, and they continued to stumble around, shout down the streets at one another, and generally get in the way long after their bones had turned to dust. So much for resting in peace. Some spirits just don't know when to quit. Even while I was carrying on the conversation with the bartender, the ghost next to me rambled on about the other places he'd lived leading up to him settling in this town, and how he'd come to find himself in each one. I think he was on Lubbock when Greg the bartender said, "If you know how to make fancy drinks, you're hired. But first, you need another scotch. The 15-year?" I scanned the bottles. Might as well make it the 18 if I'm going to be working it off. He chuckled and went to it. It was stranger than I thought it would be, coming back to my old world. I'd forgotten about the little things, like how people stuck their faces in phones while they sipped coffee in a cafe rather than reading, or, gargoyle forbid, socializing. And I'd completely forgotten how the postal system worked. The absence of owls flying low overhead with messages clutched in their talons hit like a low blow to the chest. But the most embarrassing thing I'd forgotten about was definitely the convenience of the internet, namely Google. I'd wasted hours wandering around town with Grim and Monster, getting strange looks, which took a lot to attract in a town like this. I'd finally remembered that the local library probably had computers, and those computers probably had the internet, and the internet probably had the information I was looking for. But it had ultimately been a bust, like I said. The name Tanner Culpepper turned up one person's LinkedIn profile, and unless Tanner had spent the last 6 months padding his resume and getting significant reconstructive surgery, it wasn't the man I was looking for. And when I searched for Evangeline Moody, the obituary was the first result. At first, it alarmed me. I thought I'd come too late, that she had died for real in this world before I could get here. But the second link down was the news story about the burning house, and that was familiar enough to make me check the date on the article more closely. It was from 2018, when her abusive ex-boyfriend had allegedly set fire to her house to try to kill her after she broke up with him. She'd told me this story only once before, and it had stuck with me. In her scramble to get out of the burning building, she'd tested the door handle in her bedroom, found that, surprisingly, it wasn't hot, and opened it, to find the woods of Fluke Mountain on the other side. She'd found a portal. I didn't understand how that had happened, but then again, I didn't understand much about magic. Even after so much time surrounded by it, I was still a complete novice. So she wasn't dead, but she was back. And I could imagine what kind of confusion that would cause if she'd assumed her real name upon return.